I have lived in Garland for almost 30 years. This city became my home after my husband and I moved here because of his job. We bought our apartment on the third floor of a brick five-story building when Garrett, our son, was 14. It seemed like a miracle then. 3 rooms, a spacious kitchen, a glassed-in balcony, and a quiet yard with maple trees. We got the apartment for a reason. Albert and I worked hard, saving every penny. I had been working as an accountant in a construction company for 10 years, and my husband was an engineer at a factory. Now I am 68. 4 years ago I retired, and 7 years ago Albert was gone, a heart condition. The doctor said something about a massive heart attack, but to me they were just words. The only thing that mattered was that my husband was no longer with me. Garrett was 37 at the time, married to Faye for a year, and working as a logistics specialist for a large company. Something to do with deliveries and warehouses, he explained, but I'd never fully understood all those modern terms. The apartment, which once seemed spacious to us, now seems too big to me. Especially in the evenings, when the sun goes behind the roofs of the neighboring houses and the shadows from the maples in the courtyard become long and blurry. I've gotten used to loneliness, learned to find its advantages. No one criticizes my choice of TV shows. No one rushes me when I slowly drink my morning tea while doing a crossword puzzle. No one resents me when I decide to eat dinner at 9 in the evening or read until 2 in the morning. My life flows in a measured and predictable way. I go to the pool on Mondays and Thursdays. The doctor said swimming is good for my arthritis. Tuesdays I meet former coworkers at the cafe on the corner of Elm and Pear. Wednesday is a day to go grocery shopping for the week. Friday is usually a day to clean the apartment, and weekends. Weekends used to be spent with Garrett and his family. Now those visits are rare. Ever since Garrett married Faye, our relationship has changed gradually. Subtle at first, then more and more obvious. Faye works as a receptionist for an insurance company, always impeccably dressed and very status conscious. When they first met, she was friendly and even caring. She helped set the table, took an interest in my affairs. But after the wedding, something changed. Her smile became strained, her questions became formal. And when their son, my grandson Taryn, was born, it was like Faye put a wall between us. "Miriam, we'll manage on our own," she said when I offered to help with the baby. "You have your life, we have ours." I understood her desire to be on her own, but it still hurt. Especially when I saw how easily she accepted help from her mother, who often came to visit and stayed for days at a time. Garrett didn't seem to notice these changes, or just didn't want to notice. He had always been peaceful, preferring to avoid conflict. Even as a child, if there were arguments with his friends, he would give in rather than defend his position. "Mom, not again," he said when I tried to talk to him about Faye. "It's just her personality. Besides, she's very tired at work." I stopped bringing it up. I wanted to maintain a good relationship with my only son, even if I had to put up with my daughter-in-law's coldness. Then there was Taryn, my only grandson, a smiling boy with Albert's eyes. I was willing to put up with any inconvenience for the chance to see him. When Taryn was 5, Garrett lost his job. The company he worked for had been taken over by a larger competitor, and many of the employees had been laid off. For 3 months, he searched unsuccessfully for a new position, his money melting away and his mood worsening. Faye was working, but her salary wasn't enough to cover all her expenses. So I offered to help. I had some savings I'd set aside when Albert was alive. "Just until you get back on your feet," I said, transferring the money to his account. Garrett was grateful, but Faye didn't see it that way. "You shouldn't have done that," she said the next time we met. "Garrett should be dealing with his own problems, not relying on his mommy." Her words hurt me, but I didn't say anything. After all, I wasn't helping her, but my son and grandson. 2 months later, Garrett found a new job, also in logistics, but with a smaller company. The salary was lower than before, but there was stability. Gradually, their financial situation improved, but I never got my money back. I didn't remind them. Family was more important. As the years went by, Taryn grew up, delighting me with his success at school. Unlike his father, he was determined, with a character more like his grandfather. Now he's 18, and he's in college, studying information technology. He and I have always found a common language despite the age difference and his busyness. Grandma, you are the only person who doesn't pressure me to conform to other people's expectations, he told me once when he dropped by without his parents. Those words warmed my heart. My apartment holds many memories. There's the kitchen table where Albert liked to read the morning paper, the bookshelves in the living room that we would put together, picking up each book, the little room, Garrett's former nursery, which later became my office. Here I still keep his school notebooks, old toys, and photo albums. In recent years, Garrett and Faye had been coming to see me less and less often. First weekly visits turned into monthly visits, then they became irregular. Garrett always made excuses work, renovations to their rental apartment, Taryn's school events. I knew they were excuses, but I didn't insist. I called them myself, asking what they were doing, inviting them to lunch. Sometimes they came, more often they didn't. Faye was always polite but cold. She glanced around my apartment with barely concealed disdain. The old furniture, the worn carpet, the porcelain figurines Albert and I had collected over the years. Once I heard her say to Garrett in the hallway, thinking I was in the kitchen, "I don't know why you keep all this junk. It's a nice apartment, but it's wasting so much space." I pretended I hadn't heard, but the words cut deep. To her, my stuff is junk, but to me, it's a lifetime of memories. Despite the cooling in their relationship, I continued to help them in any way I could. When Taryn went to college, I offered to pay for part of his tuition. Garrett refused at first, but then agreed. The expense was considerable. Faye didn't say anything, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. For her, I was becoming not her husband's mother, but a source of financial support. My friend Esme, whom we met at the pool, had said to me more than once, "Miriam, you're too kind to them. They're using you." But I dismissed it. Garrett is my son, and I will always help him, no matter what happens. Sometimes, though, in moments of honesty with myself, I realized that Esme was right, especially when I remembered what Faye had once said to Taryn in front of me. "Don't ask Grandma for money for a new cell phone. We're not beggars." As if helping my grandson made them look like beggars to others. I was just trying to make the boy happy. Lately, I've been catching more and more of Faye's appraising glances when she's at my place. She examines the apartment, the furniture, my jewelry, the few things I have left of my mother. Sometimes she asks the odd question, "How much do you pay for utilities, Miriam? Have you thought about moving to a smaller apartment? At your age, it's hard to keep order in such a big space." I answer evasively, but I understand why she's asking. To her, I'm an old woman who occupies valuable living space, who will sooner or later vacate it. And apparently, according to Faye, that moment should come as soon as possible. I turn 69 next Wednesday. Garrett called, said they were coming as a family. Even Faye, despite her busyness, will find time. I prepare for that day with some trepidation. Something tells me that their visit will be more than just congratulations. Yesterday, I stood at the window for a long time looking at the maples in the yard. The leaves were just beginning to turn yellow, but some of them were already snapping and twirling in the air before they hit the ground. I remembered Albert saying, "All in good time, Miri. Leaves fall when fall comes. Not sooner, not later." Perhaps there is a time of change coming in my life. A time to let go of what I've thought was mine for so long. This morning, my apartment smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. I'd baked an apple pie, Garrett's favorite dessert from childhood. The table in the living room was already set. My grandmother's china set, which I'd only brought out on special occasions, crystal glasses, and embroidered napkins, Albert's 20th anniversary gift to me. Birthdays weren't a big deal at my age, but I still wanted everything to be beautiful. The clock in the hallway struck 2. Garrett had promised to be here by 1, but I wasn't surprised he was late. It had become a habit over the years. I checked for the 3rd time to make sure everything was ready. Chicken and walnut salad, roast beef with vegetables, pie, a bottle of wine for the adults and grape juice for Taryn, though at 18 he might have preferred something stronger. At 3:30, the bell rang. I fixed my hair in front of the mirror. The gray hair was neatly styled, the lipstick on my lips soft, and went to open the door. "Happy birthday, Mom." Garrett hugged me, leaning in slightly. He was a head taller than me. He smelled like cologne and a little like cigarettes, though he claimed he'd quit smoking 2 years ago. "Grandma, hi!" Taryn hugged me too, much warmer than his father. His blonde hair had grown back and was falling over his eyes, just like Albert's when he was young. Faye stood a little apart, wearing a fashionable beige suit and high-heeled shoes. A duty smile, a cold stare. "Hello, Miriam. Congratulations." She nodded slightly, making no attempt at a hug or even a handshake. I invited them into the apartment, noting that no one had brought even flowers. Gifts were never the most important thing, though. "Come in, everything's ready. You must be hungry." "Not really," Faye shrugged, walking into the living room. "We had a snack on the way." I saw Garrett wince a little at her words, but he didn't say anything. Taryn gave his mother a reproachful look and whispered to me, "I'm hungry, grandmother, and everything smells so good." We sat down at the table. I set out the food and poured the drinks. Garrett and Taryn ate with gusto, but Faye just picked at her salad, pushing her plate of beef away defiantly. "I'm on a protein diet," she explained, though no one asked. The conversation wasn't going well. Taryn talked about college, about his new programming courses, about his plans for an internship. I listened with interest, asking questions. Garrett nodded from time to time, but he seemed distracted, as if his thoughts were somewhere far away. Faye was openly bored, glancing at her watch. "Taryn, can we stop talking about computers?" She interrupted her son as he explained some technical detail of his project to me. "It's Grandma's birthday, not a college lecture." "I'm interested," I countered. "I'm proud of Taryn's accomplishments." "Of course you are." Faye stretched her lips in a smile. "Our boy is so smart, just like his father." I almost choked. Garrett had never shown much aptitude for the exact sciences, unlike his son, who'd inherited Albert's analytical mind. When it was time for dessert, I noticed Garrett and Faye exchanging glances. There was something in those glances, some kind of agreement, a decision made in advance. "Mom, we need to talk," Garrett began, setting aside the half-eaten piece of pie. "Sure," I tried to smile. "About what?" "About the future," Garrett cleared his throat. "You see, Faye and we're going through a rough patch right now. The rent's going up and our income isn't going up. Taryn has to pay for college and we want to buy our own place," Faye interrupted him, clearly unhappy with her husband's approach. "But the prices are crazy right now." "I understand," I nodded. "If you need financial help." "No, Mom, that's not it." Garrett tapped his fingers nervously on the table. "We were thinking, look, you live alone in a two-bedroom apartment. That's a lot for one person, isn't it?" I didn't say anything, starting to see where he was going with this. "Your apartment is too big for you," Faye continued, looking me straight in the eye. "It's just the three of us in a one-bedroom rental. It's unsustainable." "What do you suggest?" I asked quietly, even though I already knew the answer. "We thought," Garrett took a deep breath, "that you could sign the apartment over to us. We'd sell it and buy two, a smaller one for you and a bigger one for us." I looked at my son, not believing my ears. My apartment was all I had left of my life with Albert. Every corner, every single thing held memories. And just like that, just rewrite it and forget it? What if I don't want to move? My voice was shaking, but I tried to stay calm. "Miriam," Faye intervened. "At your age, it's better to live in a smaller apartment. Less cleaning, less to worry about. Besides, the first floor would be more convenient, no stairs." "I like the third floor," I replied, "and I can handle the cleaning. Right now." Faye crossed her arms over her chest. "But what about 5 years from now? 10 years from now? You're not getting any younger." "Faye," Garrett said warningly, but she didn't stop. "You have to face the truth. Sooner or later, you're going to need help. Who's going to take care of you? We will. Who gets the apartment when you die? Us too. So why not settle the matter now, while everyone is healthy and sane?" "Mom!" exclaimed Taryn, who until now had been silently watching the conversation. "What are you saying?" "The truth," said Faye. "Someone has to be practical in this family." I felt a lump come up in my throat. So this is what they really think of me. An old, sick woman occupying a valuable home who needs to be gotten rid of as soon as possible. "Mom, that's not what Faye meant." Garrett tried to smooth things over. "It's just that we really need our own place. And this apartment is too big for you alone. We could find you something more comfortable, closer to us. Or you could live with us," Faye added without much enthusiasm. We'd give you a room in the new apartment. A room. In my own apartment, which I have to give to them. I need to think about it, I said, getting up from the table. It's unexpected. What's there to think about? Faye waved her hands. It makes sense. You help your son, and we help you grow old in peace. Grandma, Taryn stood up. Don't listen to them. It's your apartment, and only you decide what to do with it. Taryn, don't interfere in adult conversations. Faye shushed him. This is a family matter. I'm part of the family, Taryn replied stubbornly. And I'm ashamed of what you're suggesting to grandmother. Quiet, everyone. Garrett raised his voice. We're just discussing options. No one's forcing anyone to do anything. But I saw in his eyes what I'd seen in Faye's, the expectation that I'd agree, that I'd give in, like I'd always given in. Miriam, Faye took the lead again. You're a reasonable person. Think about the future. Garrett will still get the apartment when you die. Why not take this step now, when it could really help your son? My son, I repeated, feeling something inside me break. Not you, Faye? We're family, she cut me off. What's good for Garrett is good for me. And vice versa? I asked quietly. She didn't say anything, but her gaze spoke for her. My son, my kind, gentle boy, allowed himself to be controlled by this woman to the point of coming to claim my home. The house that Albert and I had bought with our labor, where we had raised him, where he had taken his first steps and said his first words. Garrett, I looked into my son's eyes. Is this what you really want? For me to give you the apartment? He lowered his gaze. Mom, I just want us to have our own place, so that Taryn can study in peace without worrying about rent money. I want Faye to have a place where she can host friends and coworkers without shame. And for that, you're willing to kick me out of my house? Nobody's kicking you out. He raised his voice. We'll find you another place, better, more comfortable. But not mine, I shook my head. Not where your father lived, where everything reminds me of him. Things can be moved, Faye shrugged. It's all about practicality and sentiment. That's all very well, but you can't build a future on them. I looked at them, the son who couldn't meet my gaze, the daughter-in-law with her cold calculation, the grandson, the only one who understood how cruel their offer was. Mom is asking too much of you, Garrett said, turning to me but looking at his wife as if seeking her approval. You need to think about your family. Us. Family. It was a word that once meant protection, support, love. Now it sounded like a threat. This apartment is too big for you anyway, he added, working up the courage. And when you die, it's mine. Wouldn't it be better to... Better what? I interrupted. Throw me out while I'm still alive? Is this your birthday present to me, Garrett? A demand to give you my house? It's not a demand, he blushed. It's an offer. A very generous offer, Faye agreed. We'll take care of you. I don't need you to take care of me, I said quietly but firmly. I'm doing fine on my own, and I'll do it as long as I can. And when you can't? Faye squinted. Who's going to take care of you? Us? In our cramped rented apartment? That's enough, Mom! Taryn slammed his fist on the table, making the cups clink. You're out of line. It's Grandma's birthday, and you and your father have turned it into some kind of bidding war. Don't you dare talk to your mother like that, Garrett interjected, but without much conviction. What kind of tone do you use with your grandmother? Taryn stood up. This is her home. This is her life. And you're discussing where to move her, as if she's not even human anymore. Taryn, I put my hand on his shoulder. Thank you, but no need. He shook his head. Yes, grandmother, someone has to tell them the truth. Stop being dramatic. Faye rose from the table. We're just discussing practical matters. If Miriam doesn't want to help her own son, that's her right. But then don't let her complain that we don't visit her often enough. Are you serious now? Taryn stared at his mother. Are you threatening grandmother? I'm just stating a fact, Faye cut him off. We have our own lives, our own problems, and if Miriam doesn't want to be part of the solution, then she'll be part of the problem. Garrett looked away in silence, not daring to either support or oppose her. Always like that, preferring to keep silent when a difficult decision had to be made. I could feel the anger building inside, not bright and burning, but cold, crystallizing into determination. I'd always been soft, accommodating, willing to help, but in that moment something in me changed. "I'll think about your proposal," I said, getting up from the table. "And now I think you should go. I have a headache." "But we haven't finished our tea yet," Garrett objected, clearly not expecting this turn of events. "Some other time." I headed for the door, signaling the end of the conversation. Faye pursed her lips but didn't say anything. Garrett looked confused, as if he didn't understand what had gone wrong. Only Taryn, before he left, hugged me tightly and whispered, "Forgive them, grandmother, and don't go along with this madness." When the door closed behind them, I went back into the living room and sat at the table, looking at the uneaten holiday meal, at the pie crumbs, at the glasses of unfinished wine. 69 years old, the age when, according to my son and daughter-in-law, I should give way to the young, give them my home, my memories, my independence. I looked at Albert's picture on the wall. What would he say now? Probably angry. He'd always been more determined than me. "Don't let them push you around, Miri," I heard his voice say. "You deserve better than that." And for the first time in a long time, I realized he was right. I do deserve more. After the guests left, I sat in silence for a long time. It was starting to get dark outside the window, the shadows from the maples stretching out, turning the yard into a mosaic of light and darkness. The untouched plates and glasses were still on the table. Finally, I stood up and began to clean up mechanically, absorbed in my own thoughts. Garrett's phrase echoed in my head. "When you die, I'll still have the apartment." It was as if he was already counting the days until he could inherit. My own son, the one I raised, the one I gave so much love, care, time to. He'd turned into a man who'd come to his mother's house to claim her property. I put the cup in the sink and leaned against the kitchen table. What had changed? When did my gentle, caring boy become like this? Or had he always been like this and I just didn't want to see it? My memory threw up episodes from the past. Garrett asking for money for a new video game console, even though he knew our finances were tight after Albert's illness. Here he refuses to visit me in the hospital when I broke my arm because he has an important meeting with friends. And here he is not coming to the anniversary of Dad's death, explaining that, "It's just a date, Mom. I can remember him anyway." Small incidents that seemed insignificant at one time were now adding up to a whole picture. Garrett had always been selfish. It just hadn't been as apparent before. Faye had only reinforced those traits with her cold, calculating nature. I remembered their first visits after the wedding, the way Faye had looked around the apartment, asking questions about the value of the furniture, how long ago the renovations had been done. At the time, I had written it off as the natural curiosity of a young mistress planning her home. Now I realized that she was already setting her sights on my place. "Better late than never," I muttered, wiping my hands on a towel. I walked through the living room and stopped in front of Albert's picture. He was looking at me with his gray eyes that always had a mixture of wisdom and slyness in them. "What would you do in my place, darling?" I asked quietly. Of course, the picture didn't answer, but I knew Albert better than anyone else. He never let people take advantage of him, not even those close to him. "Kindness without boundaries is no longer kindness, Miri, but weakness," he often said. I moved from room to room, touching things that had surrounded me for years. Books on the shelves, many with bookmarks by Albert, who liked to mark his favorites. The porcelain figurines we collected, one brought back from each trip. Albums of photographs, a box of letters we wrote to each other when we were young. All of it wasn't just possessions, it was our lives, our memories. And Garrett and Faye wanted me to just give it all up. For their convenience, for their plans. I stopped at the window. The streetlights were on, and the windows of the neighboring houses were already glowing. People were coming home from work, cooking dinner, spending time with their families. An ordinary evening in an ordinary town. And in one of those houses, a woman was standing at the window deciding what to do with her life. Suddenly it hit me. Garrett and Faye want my apartment? Well, maybe they should have it, but not the way they'd planned. I made a firm move toward the phone and opened my notebook. Esme had once mentioned a realtor she knew who'd helped her sister sell her house for a profit. What was his name? I flipped through the pages and found the number Orville Knox, reliable home agency. Looking at my watch, it was almost 9 o'clock at night. I decided to call tomorrow. Right now, I needed to think things through. If I sold the apartment, where would I move? What would I take with me? How would I organize everything so that Garrett and Faye wouldn't find out until the last minute? I didn't sleep much that night. I went over my options in my mind, made plans, imagined the looks on my son and daughter-in-law's faces when they found out about my decision. Strangely, the more I thought about it, the calmer I felt. It was as if I was finally shedding the weight that I had been ignoring all these years, the weight of expectations, of obligations, of guilt before my son, who, as it turned out, saw in me only a source of profit. In the morning, I called Orville Knox. His deep voice sounded professional and confident. "Mrs. Redbourne, I could come to your place this afternoon about 3 o'clock, he suggested, listening to my situation. "I'll be waiting, Mr. Knox." After the call, I felt energized. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't acting out of inertia, out of someone else's will, but out of my own judgment. It was liberating. At 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. On the threshold stood a tall, thin man in his 50s, wearing a strict gray suit. His thinning hair was neatly combed, and in his hand he held a leather briefcase. "Orville Knox," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Redbourne." I invited him in. He looked around in the hallway, nodded to his thoughts, and came into the living room at my invitation. "It's a beautiful apartment," he said, looking around the room. "Nice layout, high ceilings. The house is brick, which is a good thing nowadays. And the view from the windows?" "West and south," I answered. "The living room and kitchen face the courtyard, and the bedrooms face the street." "Great." He pulled a clipboard out of his briefcase and made some notes. "Tell me, please, about your situation. Why did you decide to sell the apartment?" I summarized the story with Garrett and Faye, leaving out the emotional details. Orville listened attentively without interrupting. "I understand," he said when I was finished. "It's an unpleasant situation, but unfortunately not uncommon. Do you want to sell the apartment and buy something smaller?" "Yes," I nodded. "Maybe a small house on the outskirts of the city. Something cozy, with a garden." "I've got a few options in mind." Orville made notes again. "But first, let's evaluate your apartment. I'd like to see all the rooms and take some pictures if you don't mind." For the next hour, we walked around the apartment. Orville asked questions about the repairs, the condition of the pipes, electrical wiring, asked about the neighbors and the infrastructure of the area. He was professional and sensitive, not making me feel like I was making a mistake or something was wrong with my decision. "Well, Ms. Redbourne," he said when we returned to the living room, "you have a great apartment in good condition. The neighborhood's upscale, the infrastructure's well developed. I think we can find a buyer quickly." He named the amount for which, in his opinion, the apartment could be sold. It was higher than I expected. "Really?" I couldn't hide my surprise. I thought it was worth less. "The real estate market in Garland is booming," Orville explained, "especially in neighborhoods like yours. Buyers are looking for the kind of apartments that have history, brick houses, and good floor plans. Not these modern anthills." I smiled, feeling the confidence in my decision growing inside. "What about a new place for me to live?" "I've got a few options that might work for you." Orville opened a folder of photos on his tablet. "Here, for example, is a small house in the Cherry Hill neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, small lot, quiet neighborhood, mostly older couples and families with children." He showed me a few other options. One of them, a small one-story house with a veranda and garden, particularly caught my eye. "This one looks cozy," I said, looking at the pictures. "It's a good choice," said Orville. "The house is newly renovated, with a new roof and heating system. The plot is small, but enough for a garden. And the price?" He named a sum that was considerably less than the estimated sale price of the apartment. "You will be left with a decent amount of money to invest or use as you see fit," he added. We discussed the details, the timing, the paperwork, the sale and purchase procedure. Orville was patient and explained everything in simple words, without using professional jargon. There is one more important thing, I said when we had finished discussing it. I want all this to remain confidential until the deal is finalized. My son must not know. Orville nodded understandingly. Confidentiality is one of our priorities, Mrs. Redbourne. No one will know about the sale unless you choose to inform yourself. When Orville left, I felt strangely relieved. The decision had been made, the path mapped out. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my own destiny. The following weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Orville organized showings to potential buyers, always when Garrett was at work, so that there would be no chance of a chance meeting. I slowly began to sort through my belongings, deciding what I would take with me to my new home, what I would give as gifts, and what I would keep. Each item brought back memories. Here was the chair Albert liked to read the newspaper in, the vase we bought on our first trip together, photographs, books, souvenirs. There was a story behind each one, but I realized I couldn't take everything. The new house was smaller, and we had to pick out the essentials. Garrett called a few times after the birthday party. The first conversation was strained. He apologized for the miscommunication, as he called it, but kept insisting that his offer was reasonable. You think carefully, Mom, he said. It's a win-win for everyone. We'll find you a smaller apartment in a good neighborhood, I answered evasively, not agreeing, but not refusing categorically either. Let him think that I was still thinking about his proposal. In subsequent calls, he didn't mention the apartment directly, but he always found a way to hint at it, telling me how hard it was for him and Faye to pay the rent, how tired Taryn was of their cramped quarters. By the way, Taryn was asking about you, Garrett said in one of their conversations. He wanted to come over this weekend. Let him come, I agreed. I'd be glad to see him. Taryn arrived on Saturday. I was glad Orville hadn't scheduled any showings that day. It would have been hard to explain to my grandson why strangers were looking at our apartment. Grandma, Taryn hugged me tighter than usual. How are you? I was worried about you after, we sat in the kitchen drinking tea and cookies I'd baked that morning. Taryn talked about college, about his projects, about his new friends. Then the conversation inevitably returned to that unfortunate birthday party. I had a fight with them, he admitted, looking into his cup. Said what they did was awful. Dad said he was just trying to help, and Mom, he hesitated. Mom thinks you've been living alone in such a big apartment for too long. I sighed. They're right in their own way, Taryn. This apartment is really too big for one old lady. You're not an old lady, he was indignant. And this is your home. They have no right to take it from you. I smiled as I looked at my grandson. How much he was like Albert, the same integrity, the same willingness to defend justice. Don't worry about me, I said softly. I know what I'm doing. You're not going to take them up on their offer, are you? He looked at me anxiously. No, I shook my head. Not in the way they presented it. Taryn exhaled in relief. Good, because that would be wrong. Mom's already talking to her friends about how she's going to redecorate your apartment when it becomes theirs. I wasn't surprised. It was so like Faye to count the chickens before they hatched. Let her discuss it, I said calmly. But you don't tell them about our conversation, okay? Let them think I'm still thinking about their proposal. Taryn looked at me carefully. Grandmother, you have some kind of plan, don't you? I can see it in your eyes. I smiled but didn't answer directly. Let's just say I'm going to take care of my future. And yours too, by the way. He didn't ask further, and I was grateful for that. Less he knows, less I have to hide from my parents. 3 weeks after Orville's visit, I signed a contract for the sale of the apartment. The buyer was a young couple with a young daughter. They had long been looking for just such an apartment in the neighborhood. Seeing the girl excitedly examining the rooms, I felt satisfaction. In these walls will again sound the laughter of children, will continue someone's family history. The same day, Orville and I went to see the house, which I liked on the photos. It was even cozier in person. Small, but bright, with a veranda overlooking the garden, where daffodils were already blooming. Wooden floors, spacious kitchen, 2 small bedrooms. And most importantly, it was completely silent, just the birds singing. I like it, I said to Orville after the tour. I love it. It's a good choice, he approved. It has good neighbors, mostly older couples. The store and clinic are a 10-minute walk away. The bus stop is close by. And importantly, the price is very reasonable. We made a deal with the owners, an elderly couple who were moving in with their daughter in another city, and I put down a deposit. Orville promised to expedite the formalities so that the deal could go through as quickly as possible. What about your will, Mrs. Redbourne? He asked me as we drove back into town. You mentioned that you wanted to make changes. Yes, I nodded. Can you recommend a good lawyer? Sure. Orville pulled out a business card holder. Florence Hewitt. She specializes specifically in inheritance cases. Very competent. I called Florence that evening and made an appointment. She turned out to be an energetic woman in her 40s, with a short haircut and a quick speech. Do you want to change an existing will or make a new one? She asked after listening to me. A new one, I answered. In the old one, I left everything to my son. Now I want to change this one. We discussed the details, and Florence drew up a document that made Taryn the primary beneficiary, not Garrett. A small amount of money was earmarked for charity, an organization that helped elderly people in difficulty. Florence warned that Garrett could contest the will after my death, but suggested several legal mechanisms to make that process more difficult. What about a will during his lifetime? I asked. I'd heard that you could transfer property while you were still alive, with the stipulation that it couldn't be disposed of until I died. Yes, that's a trust. Florence nodded. It's a good option for your situation. We drew up that document too. Now I had peace of mind that my estate would go to someone who really deserved to be taken care of, not someone who saw me as a source of profit. All this time, I kept talking to Garrett as if nothing had happened. He called about once a week, always starting with generalities and then invariably moving on to the apartment. Had you thought about our offer, Mom? He asked with a casual nonchalance. Faye has found a great place for you, a small apartment in a new building, first floor near the park. I'm still thinking about it, I answered each time. It's a big decision, and you can't make it in a hurry. He sighed, but didn't push too hard. Apparently, Faye had instructed him to be patient, not to push me. She was smart and realized that too much pressure could have the opposite effect. During one of those conversations, Garrett mentioned in passing that he and Faye were planning to come over to my place over the weekend. We want to go over some details, he said vaguely. I almost choked. This was going to be a disaster. The apartment was already half disassembled, many things packed into boxes. How to explain this to Garrett and Faye without revealing my plans? Unfortunately, I can't make it this weekend, I said, frantically thinking of an excuse. Esme and I are going to a concert. We bought the tickets a long time ago. A concert? Garrett sounded surprised. What concert? Classical music, I lied. An orchestra from the capital, you wouldn't be interested. Okay, he didn't hide his disappointment. Then maybe next weekend? We'll see, I said evasively. I'll let you know. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. I needed to speed up the process. The longer I procrastinated, the greater the chance that Garrett or Faye would get suspicious. Orville had promised that the paperwork would be ready in a week. So soon, very soon, I could start a new chapter of my life. The last week at the old apartment was spent in feverish packing. Every morning I woke up at first light and got to work sorting my things, packing what I'd decided to take with me, giving away what I didn't need. Esme helped me when she came in the afternoon. Her practical outlook was invaluable. Miriam, are you really going to take all these figurines with you? She asked, looking at the box of porcelain figurines. There might not be enough room in the new house. They're memories, I answered, wrapping each figurine carefully in paper. Albert and I had collected them over the years. Esme sighed, but didn't argue. She understood that for me these things were not just decor, but a part of a past life that I wanted to take with me. Orville called every day, updating me on the progress of the paperwork. Finally, on Wednesday, he brought the happy news that all the paperwork was done and could be signed. Congratulations, Mrs. Redbourne, he said as he handed me the keys to the new house after signing the papers. You are now officially the owner of this beautiful house. I stared at the keys in the palm of my hand, just ordinary metal keys, but they symbolized something more. Freedom, independence, a new beginning. What about my apartment? I asked, still not fully believing this was really happening. The new owners will take possession in a week as we agreed, Orville replied. You have time to finalize the move. I've arranged for a moving company to come on Friday to move your furniture and belongings. On Friday, the movers arrived. Two young men with muscular arms and serious faces. They worked quickly and carefully, wrapping furniture in protective material, carefully lowering bulky items down the stairs. I watched the process, occasionally giving instructions on what and how to move. By evening, the apartment was empty. There were only bare walls, empty closets, and an old sofa, which I decided to leave to the new owners. I walked through the rooms one last time, saying goodbye to every corner, every memory. In the bedroom where Albert and I had spent so many years together, I stopped at the window. From here I could see the yard with the maples, which had already turned completely yellow. I remembered how Albert used to sit here in his chair in the evenings, watching the sunset. Goodbye, I whispered, touching the windowsill. Thank you for everything. Esme was waiting for me at the exit. She'd insisted on spending the night with me in my new home. I don't want you to be alone the first night in your new place, she said firmly. I had already packed my bag. I was grateful for her concern. Leaving the house I had lived in for almost 30 years was not easy, despite my firmness. My new home was quiet and cool. The movers had already put the furniture in the rooms according to my instructions, but the boxes were still to be unpacked. Esme went straight to work, turning on the heat, checking the gas in the kitchen, making tea. It's not so bad, she said, looking around. It's a cozy place, and the garden's nice, so you can start planting in the spring. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. Sadness at parting with the past, anxiety about the unknown future, and, at the same time, a wonderful sense of freedom. That first night, Esme and I spread out the mattresses in the living room, since the bed hadn't been made yet. Sitting on the floor with cups of tea, we talked late into the night. Esme talked about her experience of moving after her husband's death, how hard it had been at first, but how gradually she had learned to live in a new way. You see, Miri, she said, using my pet name, which usually only Albert called me, life doesn't end, it just changes. And sometimes those changes are for the better, even if it doesn't seem that way at first. In the morning, I woke up to an unusual silence. In the apartment, I could always hear the sounds of the city, cars, voices, the noise of the elevator. Here, however, there was silence, broken only by birdsong and the rustling of leaves in the wind. I looked out the window. The garden that was now mine was bathed in the morning sun. An old apple tree, a few rose bushes, a small lawn, and no neighbors nearby. The nearest house was 50 meters away. The next few days passed in a flurry of organizing the house. I unpacked boxes, put books on the shelves, hung pictures on the walls. Each room gradually filled with life, becoming part of my new world. Esme came every day, helping me with heavy items and giving me advice on how to organize. Thanks to her, I got to know my neighbors, an elderly Mortensen couple living across the street, and a widower named Leonard, whose house was next door. Leonard tends the roses, Esme said with a mysterious smile. And he's a great cook. He invited me over for dinner when I helped him with his computer. I noticed the sly glint in her eyes, but I didn't comment. Esme was 5 years younger than me, and always had a lively personality. The third day after the move, I went to Florence Quiet's office to finalize the changes in my will. Now that I had a new home and a bank account with the money from the sale of the apartment, it was necessary to legally solidify my decisions. Florence greeted me with her usual vigor. Everything is ready, Mrs. Redbourne, she said, spreading out the papers on the table. Here is your new will. According to it, your house and most of your savings go to your grandson, Taryn Redbourne, upon your death. A certain amount is earmarked for charitable purposes. Your son, Garrett Redbourne, and his wife, Faye Redbourne, are not listed as heirs. I ran my eyes over the document. It was exactly the way I wanted it. What about the trust? I asked. These papers. Florence handed me another folder. A third of the proceeds from the sale of the apartment had already been deposited into the trust. Taryn will be able to use the money when she reaches the age of 25, or sooner if she needs it for education or to buy a house. You, as the settler of the trust, can modify the terms of the trust as needed. I signed all the documents. It felt strange to change the fate of my estate with a stroke of a pen, to exclude my own son from inheritance. But I had no doubts. Garrett had made his own choice when he came to claim my apartment. Could he contest the will? I asked Florence, referring to Garrett. Theoretically, yes, she nodded. But in practice, it would be difficult. We've drawn up the documents with every legal nuance in mind. Plus, the trust is outside the will, so he can't challenge the funds. I left Florence's office with a sense of accomplishment. The formalities were now complete. I'd sold the apartment, bought a new house, changed the will. All I had to do was tell Garrett. I'd put it off until the last minute. Every time the phone rang, I flinched, afraid I'd hear my son's voice. But he didn't call. Apparently, following Faye's strategy, he'd decided to give me time to think about their proposal. Finally, when the house was all set up, I decided it was time. Sitting on the veranda with a cup of tea, I dialed Garrett's number. My heart was pounding faster than usual, and my palms were sweating, but I was ready for this conversation. Mom? Garrett's voice sounded surprised. You rarely call yourself. Is something wrong? Yes, I answered calmly. I moved. The silence on the other end of the line was so long that I thought I'd lost the connection. What do you mean you moved? Garrett finally said. Where? When? I bought a small house on the outskirts of town, I said. I moved in 3 days ago. I'm all settled in now. But, he hesitated. What about your apartment? Our apartment? I sold it, I answered simply. To a young family with a child. They were very happy when they found out they could buy such a spacious apartment in a good neighborhood. There was silence again, but now I could almost physically feel Garrett's shock. You sold the apartment? His voice shook. Without my knowledge? Without my consent? Why would I need your consent, Garrett? I asked. The apartment was mine. I could use it as I pleased. But, we talked. He was clearly at a loss for words. We discussed that you'd sign it over to us and we'd find you something smaller. I found it myself, I said. A house with a garden. It's very quiet, nice neighbors. I like it. Mom, you don't understand. He sounded annoyed. Faye and I were counting on this apartment. We had plans. I had plans too, Garrett, I said firmly. To live the rest of my life in my own house with my own things. But you and Faye decided otherwise. You came to me on my birthday and demanded that I give you my house. We didn't, he objected. We offered a deal that would be good for everyone. Everyone? I grinned involuntarily. Or just you and Faye? He sighed, clearly trying to contain his irritation. Okay, what's done is done. But why didn't you tell us? Why did everything in secret? Would you rather I had told you in advance? I asked. So you and Faye could stop me? We wouldn't. He hesitated. We'd just discuss all the options. We already discussed them at my birthday party, I reminded him. I didn't like your options. I chose mine. There were muffled voices on the phone. Apparently Faye was nearby, asking what was going on. Faye wants to talk to you, Garrett said after a pause. Miriam. Faye's voice sounded cold. Do you realize what you've done is extremely selfish? We offered to help you, to care for you, and you went behind our backs and sold the apartment to some strangers. It was my apartment, Faye, I said calmly. I had the right to use it as I saw fit. But it was supposed to go to Garrett when you died. Her voice rose. It would have been our insurance for the future, our inheritance. That's it. The truth at last. They didn't see my apartment as my home, but as their future possession, as insurance. Plans change, Faye, I said. I have a new home now, and I'm very happy with it. And where is it, this new house of yours? I could hear the barely contained fury in her voice. I gave her the address, though my inner voice warned me that their visit might be unpleasant. We'll be there, Faye said. Tonight. We need to discuss this in person. As you wish, I agreed. I'll be home. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. The first step is over. They know about the move. Now I had to prepare for their visit, which I knew would be intense. I called Esme, telling her about my conversation with Garrett and Faye. Do you want me to come over? She offered. I could be a moral support. No, I said after a moment's thought. This is a family matter. I have to deal with them on my own. Are you sure? I could hear the doubt in Esme's voice. They could be unpleasant. I can handle it, I said firmly. After all, I'd already done the hardest part, sold the apartment and moved out. Nothing would change their minds now. I spent the rest of the day waiting. I made tea and cookies. Old habits of hospitality are not easily eradicated. I checked the house was in order, though who cared what condition my new home was in. But I wanted it to look perfect, so they couldn't say I'd made a mistake moving here. Around 6 p.m., I heard the sound of a car pulling up. I looked out the window and saw Garrett's car stopping at the gate. They had arrived. The sound of the slamming car door cut through the evening silence. I stood at the window watching Garrett help Faye out of the car, holding the door with exaggerated gallantry. Behind them, to my surprise, Taryn appeared. I hadn't expected to see my grandson, and for a moment I was confused. His presence changed the dynamic of the conversation to come. Faye walked ahead, stamping her step on her high heels, which sank ridiculously into the soft garden soil. Her face was contorted with a grimace of displeasure. Garrett followed her with the expression of a man on his way to execution. Taryn trailed behind with his hands in his pockets, slouching as if he wanted to be invisible. I opened the door before they could knock. Good evening, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Come in. Faye gave me a cold stare, as if assessing the merchandise on the counter. So this is where you ran off to, she said instead of greeting me. I didn't run away, Faye, I said calmly. I moved. There's a difference. She snorted and walked into the house without waiting for an invitation. Her gaze slid over the walls, the furniture, the things with blatant disdain. Grandmother, Taryn hugged me. I'm sorry to drop by unannounced. I only found out about your move today. I'm glad you came, I said sincerely. Garrett stomped awkwardly to the door, then came over and kissed me awkwardly on the cheek. Hi, Mom, he murmured. Interesting. Place. I led them into the living room where the table was already set with tea and cookies. Faye defiantly refused to sit down, continuing to look around the house with the look of an inspector looking for irregularities. Is that damp on the ceiling? She asked, pointing to a faint stain in the corner. And the windows are old, so they'll probably blow in the winter. Are you sure you looked at everything before you bought it? Faye, let's have tea first. Garrett tried to intervene, but she waved him away. What tea, Garrett? Don't you see what's going on? Your mother sold the apartment that was supposed to be ours and bought this shack in the middle of nowhere. It's not a shack. It's a perfectly decent house, I argued, feeling my anger boiling up inside me. And I like it. Of course you do. Faye pursed her lips. Away from us so we can't keep an eye on you. So you can do whatever you want without looking back at your family. I am family, Faye, I reminded her. And yes, I have the right to do what I think is right. Mom, stop it. Taryn looked at Faye with irritation. Grandma has every right to live wherever she wants and however she wants. Don't interfere in adult conversations, Faye cut him off. It's none of your business. Whose business is it? Taryn raised his chin. Yours? Since when did it become your business to decide the fate of Grandma's apartment? Faye ignored him, turning to me again. You sold the apartment without our knowledge, behind our backs. An apartment that was supposed to secure the future of your son and grandson. It's selfish and irresponsible. I felt my patience wearing thin. All those weeks of preparation, the secret meetings with the realtor and lawyer, the nights without sleep, all to protect myself from this greedy woman and my gutless son who danced to her tune. Selfish? I repeated, standing up. Selfish is going to your elderly mother's house on her birthday and demanding the apartment. Selfish is planning someone else's estate while the owner is still alive. It's selfish to take what doesn't belong to you. Mom, we didn't demand, Garrett started, but I interrupted him. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. When you die, I still get the apartment. Remember those words, Garrett? You said them at the dinner table the day I was born. You were waiting for me to die so you could have the apartment, but you decided it was too long. It's more convenient to get it now, isn't it? You've got it all wrong, Garrett paled. We just wanted to help you. You live alone, it's hard for you to keep a big apartment. And now it's going to be hard for me to keep this house, isn't it? I chuckled. It's strange that you care so much about my well-being, but only when it comes to real estate. She's manipulating you, Garrett, Faye interjected, her eyes glittering. Making you look like a villain, even though you've always been a good son. We offered her help, and she repaid us with betrayal. Betrayal? I couldn't help but laugh. That's an interesting interpretation. Do you think betrayal is when I dispose of my property as I see fit? Or betrayal is when I disobey your plans for my life? You know exactly what I mean. Faye lowered her voice to a menacing hiss. You did it all on purpose in secret. Sold the apartment to some strangers instead of securing your own family's future. You only think of yourself. Were you thinking about me when you were planning to move me into a smaller apartment? I didn't back down. Or when you were discussing how you'd remodel my apartment after I moved out? Faye was confused for a moment. Where did you? Taryn told me. I nodded toward my grandson. And don't look at him like that, Faye. He's the only one in this family who really cares about me as a person, not as an obstacle to my inheritance. How dare you? Faye raised her voice. We've been taking care of you for years, coming over, helping you. When was the last time you came just for fun, Faye? I asked quietly. Not to ask for money, not to discuss my apartment, but just to visit an old woman? She was silent, unable to find an answer. Garrett looked from me to his wife helplessly. I've noticed for a long time that you see me only as a source of profit, I continued. At first I refused to believe it, blaming it on your difficulties, your busyness. But your behavior at my birthday party opened my eyes. You don't respect me. You don't consider me a person with my own desires and rights. To you, I'm just an old woman occupying valuable living space and preventing you from getting what you think is yours. That's not true, Garrett muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice. It is, and you know it. I looked him in the eye. You've allowed Faye to turn you into a man who goes to his mother's house to claim her property. A man who counts the days until she dies so he can get his inheritance. Do you think your father would be proud of you now? Garrett flinched as if I'd slapped him. The mention of Albert had clearly struck a nerve. Don't you dare use my father's memory against me, he whispered. And don't you dare betray that memory with your actions, I replied. Albert would never let you treat me like this. Enough! Faye slammed her palm on the table, spilling the tea. We didn't come here to hear accusations. We want to know what happened to the money from the apartment sale. That's the real reason for their visit. Not concern for my welfare, not outrage at my betrayal, but money. Always money. It's none of your business, I replied calmly. None of our business? Faye laughed an unkind laugh. The apartment was supposed to be ours, so the money from its sale should be ours too. Mom, Taryn looked at Faye with unconcealed disgust. Do you hear what you're saying? It's Grandma's money, her apartment, her life. You're too young to understand, Faye cut him off. In a family, everyone has to take care of each other. Grandma could have helped us with the down payment on a new apartment, but instead she bought this shed. It's not a barn, it's a house. I could feel my voice shaking with anger. And I don't have to account for my finances to you. So you spent all your money on this house? Garrett asked, looking around. But it's worth a lot less than your apartment. I did what I thought was right, I said evasively. I spent some of it on the house, some of it in an account. That's all you need to know. No, not everything, Faye stepped forward. We want to know specific amounts. How much was the house worth? How much is left? Where is that money now? I don't have to answer those questions. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. And I think you should go. We're not going anywhere until we get some answers. Faye stood up, her hands at her sides. Mom, that's enough, Taryn interjected. Grandma's right. It's her money, and she doesn't have to answer to us. Are you choosing her side? Faye turned to her son, her face contorted with anger. After all we've done for you? I'm choosing the side of common sense, Taryn answered calmly. Grandmother has the right to dispose of her property, and you and your father are acting as if she is no longer a person, but a hindrance to her inheritance. How dare you? Faye began, but Garrett interrupted her. Taryn's right, he said, suddenly firm. We've gone too far. Mom, he turned to me. I'm sorry. We really haven't behaved very well. But you have to understand us. We were counting on this apartment. We had plans. Plans based on my assets, I finished for him. The property that you thought was yours when I was alive. Garrett, you're my son and I love you. But your behavior lately, it's not you. It's Faye's influence. Don't you dare blame me! Faye raised her voice to a scream. I've always wanted the best for Garrett and Taryn. And you're a selfish old woman who thinks only of herself. Mom! Taryn grabbed her arm. Stop it right now! Let me go! She broke free. I'm not going to be silent when this woman is stealing from her own family. She's not stealing from anyone, Taryn objected. It was her money. It was her apartment. You don't understand anything. Faye gave him a scornful look. You're as selfish as she is. No wonder you two got together. Enough. Garrett finally intervened, his voice sounding tired. We're leaving. Mom, I'm sorry about all of this. We'll talk later when everyone has calmed down. Faye opened her mouth to object, but Garrett took her hand with unexpected firmness. We're leaving, he repeated. Now. She wrenched her hand away but headed for the door, throwing it open as she went. This isn't over, Miriam. You'll regret your decision. Garrett looked back at me guiltily, then followed his wife. Taryn remained standing in the living room, clearly torn between his duty to his parents and his desire to stay with me. Go, I said softly. They're your parents, no matter how they behave. I'll be back, he promised. Tomorrow. I need to talk to you. After they left, I sank into the chair, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted off me that I'd been carrying for so long that I'd almost stopped noticing it. Only now that it was gone did I feel how heavy it had been. Taryn kept his promise and came the next day. We talked for a long time, sitting on the veranda and looking out at the garden, where the wind played with the fallen leaves. I've never seen my mother like this, he said quietly. She yelled at my father all the way home, accusing him of being weak. Said that if he was a real man, he'd make you give him the money. I shook my head. Poor Garrett. All his life he'd been looking for approval first from his father, then from me, now from Faye, and he's never found it enough. What's in your new will, grandmother? Taryn asked bluntly. You changed it, didn't you? I didn't hide the truth from my grandson. I told him about the trust, that he was the primary beneficiary, not Garrett. Taryn listened to me silently, without interrupting. You didn't have to do this, he said finally. I know, I said. But I wanted to. You're the only one who sees me as a person, not as a source of profit, and I know you'll use that money wisely. My parents would be furious if they found out, he pointed out. If, I emphasized. They don't have to know now. It would only complicate things. Taryn agreed to keep the secret. He hugged me tightly before he left. I will visit you, grandmother. Often. Not because you left me an inheritance, but because I love you. Weeks passed, and then months. My new life gradually took shape. I planted roses that my neighbor Leonard had shared with me, and I planted a small vegetable garden where I grew herbs and vegetables. In the mornings, I liked to sit on the veranda with a cup of tea, watching the sun rise over the trees. Esme often came to visit me, sometimes staying overnight. We cooked together, watched old movies, shared memories. She introduced me to other neighbors, the Willoughby family living 2 streets over, and the widow Jenkins, who kept a small library in her house. Taryn came every weekend, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone. He helped me around the house, fixed things I couldn't fix myself, told me about his progress in college. Garrett called, but rarely. Our conversations were short and strained. He never mentioned the night he and Faye came over to my place, as if trying to erase it from his memory. Faye hadn't called at all, and as far as I knew from Taryn, had forbidden my name from being mentioned in their house. That didn't make me sad. I was finally free, not only from their manipulations and expectations, but also from my own sense of duty, which had forced me to tolerate their behavior for so long. I learned to live for myself, to take care of myself, to value my wants and needs. Sometimes, on particularly quiet evenings, I would pull out a picture of Albert and tell him about my new life. About the house, about the garden, about Taryn, who looked so much like him, about Garrett, who had chosen his path, even if it wasn't the one we'd hoped for. Faye, whose greed and calculation nearly destroyed our family. You would have approved of my decision, I said to the pictures. You always said you shouldn't let others decide for you, even if those others are your loved ones. And I thought Albert was smiling from the photo, agreeing with me. I made the right choice. I protected myself and my future. And even though Garrett and Faye think I'm selfish, I've finally learned to be selfish in a good way. I learned to put my own interests first, and it was the right thing to do. After all, as Taryn once said, you can't live your whole life for others, Grandma. Sometimes you have to live for yourself. And I was grateful to fate for realizing that, albeit in the twilight of my life. Better late than never.